In 1985, WWE would hit the big time and air on one of the big three TV networks, NBC. Saturday night's main event would periodically air on, well, Saturday nights and sometimes even replace Saturday Night Live. These specials would be filled with countless great 80s and 90s wrestling moments. Titles would change hands, Mr. T would box Cowboy Bob Orton, the Mega Powers would both form and explode, and it was all on Saturday night's main event on NBC. These shows really were must-see TV. Recently, WWE has come back to NBC, and Saturday night's main event is back with the great matches and moments. With this episode of Two Views Wrestling, we wanted to take a look at some of my favorite old school Saturday night main event matches. So let's go back to the 80s, the time of mullets, Joe Piscopo, and larger-than-life wrestling stars. You know, the Bushwhackers and Doink the Clowns of the world. Let's take a look at the list. This would be the last Saturday night's main event for 14 years, and it features this great Intercontinental title match. The Heartbreak Kid was repping the 90s with the zebra cow print tights, and this was a great power versus spot where Shawn removed the turnbuckle pad, but it didn't come into play for several minutes. You almost forgot about it by the time Davey Boy gets slammed into it. This also had a creative finish with Bulldog's bad back giving out on a superplex and HBK reversing it into a pin and winning the match. This would be the first singles title of the greatest in-ring performer ever.
So going back to watch this match because I wasn't alive in the 80s. First thing, Shawn is amazing. The match was awesome. To me, for GOAT, it's Shawn, Bret Hart, Eddie Guerrero. I think it depends on which style you like the most, on who you pick. I still probably lean towards Bret because I like the fact that he made it look like a fight. But having said that, something that jumped out to me right away, and I wanted to ask the historian here, British Bulldog. I was like, dude, every time this match, that look with the long hair, the Bret Hart match at SummerSlam, any other time I watched him in a match with long hair like old WCW, I'm like, this dude's a fucking star. But as a kid, and when I rewatch Attitude Era stuff, I'm like, it just felt like so generic, like that buzz cut. Like, whenever I see him with the long hair and the built fucking monster he looks like, I'm like, dude, this dude is a warrior. Like, he fucking star. When I see the buzz cut, that Attitude Era British Bulldog, as a kid, and even looking back now, I'm like, it's just so generic, and it's like, oh, those are fake muscles. That's steroids. Like, oh, he's like, am I right? You agree with that? Where he was like presented as a star with that long hair, and then just the buzz cut, like later in life, it just felt like something wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, I don't even think it's so much he was presented as a star. He looked like a star. They didn't really present him as a star, but he did look like it was different. Like, everybody was rocking the mullet during this time period, and everybody kind of looked the same with the mullet. But he had the, I don't know, braids, the long braids, and yeah, the long tights. And he looked massive in this time period. And then you look at the great match with Bret, which is probably the greatest Intercontinental title match ever. This match is no slouch either. He leaves and goes to WCW. And dude, when he was no selling Vader shit, blew my mind. You could put all the titles on this dude. He was doing that delayed suplex on Vader. Like, that's insane. And then, yeah, once he cut his hair, it was like, this is generic. Like, this is some kid made this on the video game, and they only had one hairstyle to choose from. Like, it definitely, like, he lost his aura, and it wasn't the same to me.
Aura is a good word, dude. That's, I think, what I'm missing with it. It's like something, his aura just completely changed.
Yeah, and I agree with that, yeah.
So what's number 4?
Number four, we're still talking Shawn Michaels. The Rockers versus Brainbusters from March 11th, 1989. Two of the best tag teams from the best era of tag team wrestling. The Rockers kind of started off as a Rock and Roll Express ripoff, but I think they were able to step out of that shadow and make their own mark. And I think a big reason for that is because they were so creative and smooth with their double team moves. Like, think the Young Bucks, but with actual full set of hair and 20 years ago, 20 years before the Young Bucks. And, Arn and Tully were the vets here, and it showed. They did a good job of cutting off the Rockers and wearing them down. The Busters were also the heels, and they had some good blind tags, and that helped get the advantage. It also featured a great spot of Bobby Heenan getting involved and tossed out that got a huge pop. And I wish that we had got a big SummerSlam or WrestleMania match from these two teams.
Looking back at the match, it was phenomenal to me, and what I really loved is it felt like modern wrestling. There was these spots, but it all felt like natural and not choreographed. It made the spots felt like it was a fight. It was real. Where like a lot of times spots these days they feel choreographed and it's like, all right, get up, go to the next spot. Where these guys were okay with their spots being messy. And another thing I wanted to ask is that pop for Heenan. What is it about today's wrestling where it feels like managers are nothing? Like, I know we have Paul Heyman, but like MVP, I I don't see a pop would happen if he gets thrown out. Where like I did like Leo Rush when he was managing Bobby Lashley. I thought that was funny, and I feel like that would get pops if he gets kicked out. But like it feels like there's no one cares about managers.
Yeah, I think, especially looking at Bobby Heenan, he was almost always the star of the guy he was with. And I'm talking about like guys with Andre, Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, and even the Brainbusters were big stars. And it wasn't so much that he was trying to overshadow them. There was almost like no ego involved, and they let him have that. And he was so good at getting the heat and drawing the heat that when they do a thing where he gets tossed out, now it's a fair match, it gets a huge pop. And I feel like the closest thing to Bobby Heenan now is Paul Heyman, but they never toss Paul Heyman out. Like, we want that old school kind of thing where now we have a fair match, and they kind of don't do that anymore. And then I also feel like guys' egos today won't let a manager kind of steal their shine or take the shine from them. They want to be involved too, and they want to be a part of it. And I feel like you need guys to kind of step back, let the manager draw the heat, let the manager carry the promos. I think if we could get back to that and you have the right people doing it, then we could bring back great managers.
Moving forward on the list.
Number three, we got Macho Man Randy Savage versus Jake Roberts from November 29th, 1986. I was 2 months old at the time. I feel like this was a huge match in the early days of the Saturday Night's main event. Jake was easily the number two babyface behind Hogan, and Macho was definitely the number one heel, and also the Intercontinental title was on the line. This was 5 years before their famous feud that would see Jake let a cobra bite the Macho Man in a horrific scene. Macho Man was afraid of the snake here, and at one point even threw the snake under the ring, which I thought was a funny spot. I also like how Savage had the DDT scouted and would reverse it every time Jake went for it. And I think this is just a really good hidden gem between two all-time greats.
What I liked about this match going back to watch it for the first time, I liked that the promos happened before the match. And then the other thing that jumped out to me really as well, like I've seen Savage stuff obviously like as a kid, and then going back, like his match with Steamboat's probably the most watched match I've ever seen. I constantly watch that. But getting the promo and getting the Elizabeth feel and just the vibe during that match it really put into perspective to me like how big of a star Savage is, and like honestly, how much he shits on today's current wrestlers. And I'm just like, what is it? Like what do these guys lack that this guy had it? And I guess it's like, oh, well, you know, it's just that easy. He had it and they don't. But it's like there has to be something there.
Yeah.
And I just part of me feels like I think with a lot of these older guys that were stars, what I feel like I pick up is like Bret Hart, it was real to them. And I think these wrestlers today maybe it's just kind of a job. Where
Yeah.
I think like Scott Hall always, even Scott Hall, he might have like in shoots he shitted on Bret because he's like, oh, he lived this gimmick, like he thought wrestling was. Hogan said that too before. Hogan and Hall and others might not have lived it to the point that Bret Hart did, but I also think that they lived it still. Like
Yeah.
they kept kayfabe alive in a
Yeah.
sense. Like they wanted it to make it look as real as possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say believability. You believed that Macho Man was paranoid and obsessed with Miss Elizabeth, and also it was very simple. Like it wasn't this crazy, spot fest type of match. Everything was very simple. It was pulled off well, and it made so much sense that Savage would scout the DDT. That was Jake's move. It was one of the deadliest moves. So of course, a guy who's a champion in professional wrestling is going to do his homework, and he's going to know like if I'm in this position, I have to get out. So I think that that was cool. And you bring up Brett like making it real. Like if you professional fighters, if they train for a fight and they know this guy's going to try to take me down, you practice that. So I think it's cool that Savage was prepared to reverse the DDT.
And this just reminded me, I want to go back to number 4 real quick. Another thing I wanted to mention about the Brainbusters and the Rockers is Tully Blanchard. I wasn't too familiar with. Obviously, I probably shouldn't say this because she gets a lot of backlash on the internet, but I am huge Tessa Blanchard fan. Like, let's ignore all the dirt
You're
sheet
just talking
reports,
about the in ring.
in-ring
Yeah.
stuff. That
Yeah.
girl's good. Dude, Tully doing aerial moves off the turnbuckle felt more impactful than all this aerobatic stuff these guys do today. And I'm like, dude, just like the way, like I'm not the, you know, I'm not a guy that watches a shit ton of 80s wrestling. So when you bring this stuff up to me and I watch it and I'm like, oh shit, these guys made it like believable. And I'm like, damn, dude, Tully Blanchard's out here just doing like an axe handle off the
Yeah.
turnbuckle. And I'm like, that shit looks like it hurts more than
630 splash from
yeah. Like
whoever. Yeah.
I'm like, it was just. I wanted to give Tully Blanchard props on that. Also, I seen a video. Coworker, he's he's older. He's like 70. He grew up in that day, and he was like, oh, look at the Four Horsemen. Look at how like rough shape they're in. But Tully, dude, he like still looked really good
good,
shape.
yeah.
I was like, damn. I was like,
Yeah.
Tully looks like he could still kick someone's ass. Like,
Yeah. Cocaine, dude.
yeah. All right, moving on the list.
Number 2, I have the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan versus Mr. Perfect and the Genius. And this is from January 27th, 1990. Hogan and Warrior are probably the strongest super team in history. And it makes sense that the two guys that would agree to a match with them is a guy that thinks he's perfect and a guy that thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. The team of Perfect and Genius was good, and I wish that they had gotten a longer run together. There's a really funny bit where Perfect is being bounced around the ring like a ping pong ball, and the Genius is writing poetry on his scroll. Hogan was out here busting out small packages like he was in the Tokyo Dome, and I'm sure Meltzer would have given it 5 stars if it did take place in the Tokyo Dome. This is a really good match where everyone is at their best. Hogan and Warrior are unstoppable. Perfect is bumping his ass off, and the Genius is flamboyant. And it also sets up that mega main event for WrestleMania 6 between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, so this match kind of ruin my childhood a little bit again. Like as a kid, I remember thinking Warrior was awesome. Thinking Warrior and Hogan had this great match at WrestleMania. Rewatching Warriors matches, I just I'm like I'm a little let down, and I'm like, damn. I was like, kid version me, the best. Adult version me is like, I could. It's all right. What really jumped out to me in this match was just well, first off, I love the storyline, like you just said, the super team, and then someone who thinks they're
Two
perfect.
cocky, arrogant guys are like, yeah, we could take them.
I was like, that's the shit that makes me love wrestling, storylines like that. Mr. Perfect was like, I always knew like Mr. Perfect was good, and then I've always liked anytime I watch Mr. Perfect's matches, but just the way he was selling for Hogan was like, it was just awesome to me. And I think that is really that's another thing I think can get lost in modern times in wrestling. Sometimes I feel like guys don't necessarily want to sell, and it's like, dude, it just like everyone knows Mr. Perfect's a legend. It doesn't make him look bad that he sold.
Yeah,
Um, but that jumped out to me was Mr. Perfect was just,
yeah,
he's like, hey, dude, Hogan's the man, and I'm gonna make him look good. It's like, dude, that's teamwork. Like,
yeah. Going back and watching this, in hindsight being what it is, I get why they did WrestleMania 6 main event, but like if you would have had Perfect win the Royal Rumble and then pin Hogan in this tag match and he stays quote unquote perfect, give me Hogan and Perfect at WrestleMania 6 for the title, you know, Hogan going against this guy that has never lost, and then give me the Genius and Warrior for the Intercontinental title. I feel like that's still an epic WrestleMania for me. So I wish, you know, just off of this, I wish that they would have done that, and I think that that could have sold too. For number one, I have Hulk Hogan versus the Big Boss Man from May 27th, 1989. So this is for the WWE title, and it's inside that big blue steel cage. But before the match, Hulk is confronted by the debuting Zeus. Now, if you don't know Zeus, Zeus was the villain from the Oscar winning film No Holds Barred that Hulk Hogan was the star of. And I was just a little guy when this happened, and it turned my world upside down. I was scared of Zeus when I saw No Holds Barred, but I knew that that was a movie and not real. But in my little kid's mind, wrestling was real. So Zeus showing up had me scared to go to sleep. I was the biggest Hulkamaniac, and surely he would hunt me down to get at Hulk. Now, moving on from that trauma, this was still a great world title match. Bossman was a great monster heel here, and him and Hogan worked really well together. The Hulkster suplexing Bossman off the top of the cage was a crazy spot that Bret Hart would steal 5 years later. And also, the Doctor of Style Slick was one of my favorite managers during this period, and him getting involved and being tossed around by Hogan was cool. And in the end, Hogan would be victorious and would pose in the ring with Slick's hat on and a nightstick down his trunk.
the thing I wanted to ask about with this match, not necessarily this match, but about Big Boss Man. So seeing that he got this main event match for the title with Hogan, and then he also had the feud with the Mega Powers. So around this time, he was presented as a main eventer. Me, growing up as a kid, I always saw him as like a mid card at best. Like I remember the Big Show stuff, the Al Snow stuff. But with the Al Snow stuff, I remember even as a kid, like I'm like, yo, this is shit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
in your opinion, just what could have happened that made Big Boss Man go from main eventer to kind of like it felt like a joke mid carder to me when I was a kid.
I think it's just the changing of the times. I don't that that boss man in the Attitude Era couldn't have been a main event guy, and I don't really consider the Big Boss Man a main event guy. He had the Mega Powers and this match with Hogan; those were main event matches. But it was almost like a kiss of the main event. Like you could put him in that position and know he's going to deliver a good match for you and a good feud, and then take him back out and bring him back down to the mid card, and it didn't hurt him. So I never really considered him a main event guy, but he was a great mid card guy, and a great heel for a main event babyface. I feel like.
So necessarily he wasn't a threat for a title though back then.
Yeah, I don't know if it's. I feel like Ray Traylor, the wrestler, he could have carried a world title. I don't think that the Big Boss Man, the character, could have been a world champion.
Okay, yes, yeah. So that's just what jumped out to me right away. It's like, damn, I was like, he got a main event for this title, and then I knew he had the main event feud with the Mega Powers, and I was just like, was he a threat to win the title? Because growing up as a kid, I knew he wasn't a threat for the
Yeah.
title. I don't even think they really had any. I don't remember any like main event programs really as a kid for him. I know. I mean, like obviously the Big Show one stands out, but
Yeah.
like it wasn't like it was for the world title. Like
He was, yeah, he was kind of like just a mercenary for Vince McMahon against Steve Austin. But talking about Ray Traylor, I feel like his work as Big Bubba and Mid South with Bill Watts Company was really good, and he was their world champion, and I thought he was good then. And I thought that the Big Bubba character in the 80s came across as this really great monster. And I love the Big Boss Man as a heel and a face, so I still think he's a legend and deserves praise and everything. And I don't think lacking a world title is a knock on anybody.
yeah, definitely not because fucking
But that Kennel from Hell match is
yeah.
that's a knock on Al Snow and Big Boss Man, and that's rough.
Yeah, I don't know what Vince McMahon was thinking with that one.
Yeah, it's probably a Vince Russo thing.
All right, in the comments, let us know some of your favorite moments from Saturday night's main event.